So that cable goes straight into the camera, and we're going to grab the sub-octave out. It's 2 octaves below, it's a pulse. Go into this mixer and out into the tube distortion. So the saturation control will change the timbre pretty substantially. There's 2 gain stages, and this is one gain stage by itself. You can hear the saturation change, and then both stages in series, you get more gain, more breakup, and then the harmonics control significantly affect the harmonic content. Module gets really interesting where it has a CV control input. So I'm going to take this LFO sine wave here, run that into the CV input here. And that will modulate the saturation. This is really sensitive to the levels and the amount of CV. And at certain points the tube will actually go into cutoff completely. Like this. And it's kind of an interaction between all these controls. So there the harmonics are turned all the way down. As I turn the CV up, you kind of get this edginess. It can be dialed in. It's really nice for bass sounds. So right away we have a fairly interesting bass line type effect. And then the harmonics can be adjusted quite a bit. There's the harmonics control. You can kind of hear the interaction between these controls. It's pretty drastic. Put it on the single gain stage. It's a little less gain. Controls interact totally differently. Just a lot of little sweet spots depending on your signal levels and the amount of CV that you're using. So I'll introduce another signal here. We'll grab the pulse, square wave. So that's 2 octaves below our original signal, so now we've added this kind of harmonic layer on the top. And then by adjusting the pulse width, we kind of add this interesting fizziness. And that will be probably more noticeable, a little more gain. I can play with this pulse width. So there's almost a perfect square right in the center. And then as we adjust the pulse width, it's a very, very narrow pulse being mixed in. There's that pulse by itself. So back to the double gain. CV is a little more drastic with the extra gain because the tube is closer to cutoff. If I mix in the sub signal again, So that's all without a filter, without a VCA, without any sort of pitch control. It's just the oscillator going into the mixer, going into the tube distortion, and going into the camera. And then the LFO modulating just the tube distortion. The other thing you could play with at this point is the pulse width modulation. So let's just grab another output of the LFO, like this, let's grab the saw, and start playing with the pulse width modulation. So now this is kind of almost cutting in and out. Bring in the lower octave again, a little more. Yeah, so this is a sine wave going into the tube distortion and a saw wave going into the pulse width input. Play with the tuning a little bit. This is definitely a great setup for generating really strong bass sounds. You could then run this through a low-pass filter to really take advantage of all these extra harmonics that have been generated. And if you have two low-pass filters, you can actually put one on each side of the tube distortion and control kind of the input side of maybe a really resonant squelchy filter going into the distortion, getting distorted, and then processing that with another low-pass filter on the output. So this just kind of shows what you can do with the CV input of the tube distortion with an LFO and just some really basic patching. So I'm here with the vacuum tube distortion, and this time we have it routed through a low pass filter here. This is the 2044 filter. That was the same filter used in like the Korg Poly 6. So we have a pulse out of this oscillator here, square wave. It's a pulse width control there. Just going into the tube distortion, coming out, going into the low pass filter, and then going to the camera. There's no VCA, there's no pitch control, so it's the only pitch control we have at this time. So there's not like a MIDI sequence or anything playing. And we're just going to play around with the harmonic interaction between the filter and the tube distortion. So the filter's wide open right now. The harmonics and the CV are turned down. It's just a single gain stage. The saturation's just right in the center. So the filter wide open, pretty much just hearing the tube distortion. We start to close the filter. And then also bring in some resonance. So here we can start to hear how all the extra harmonics we're generating with the tube distortion are getting processed. So kind of a nice, edgy, nasally type sound. If I move even over to a sine wave, still quite an edgy sound. We'll turn the saturation up. Definitely not a sine wave anymore. If we add the second stage, now there's two stages of distortion. We have even more harmonics. Poor sine wave. So the resonance up quite a ways. So you can hear the harmonics kind of catching as the filter's being swept. That's the resonance back down. The bass kind of comes back. So if we take a little bit of CV, sine wave into the CV input here, Bring that in a little bit. So now we've got a little CV processing this. And again, this is just a sine wave. So you can hear all the harmonics are being added. Adjust the harmonics control. So I'll play around with the filter a little bit. There's a lot of harmonics being generated off of this simple sine wave. Bring in some resonance. Sweep through the pitch. If we go to a saw, that's a little better for maybe making an aggressive bass sound. Bring this down a little. Play around with the saturation harmonic controls over here. So you can see how that's kind of interacting with the CV control. Sometimes there's enough CV to actually cause the tube to go into cutoff, and it just kind of quits making sound. So with the right settings, you could actually use it as kind of a gate or kind of a primitive VCA. Maybe if you rigged it up to an envelope set up just right, you can get it to function as a VCA, which is kind of fun. It's very distorted. You can see as we adjust the saturation, that gating effect kind of changes and goes away. We have to turn the CV up even more to get that to come back. So it really depends what type of signal is going in here, and what's kind of before and after the tube distortion as to kind of how the controls behave. It's a little bit random sometimes. There's a lot of little exploits, getting everything kind of lined up just right. We'll play with the filter again. Bring the resonance back down. So here you can hear kind of the sound with the filter wide open. Good bass sound, lots of harmonics. This would be a great sound to run a bass sequence through. There's the saturation and harmonic controls again. So just kind of hear a different range of harmonics. Bring the filter back down. And then bring in some resonance. It's really nice. So just to keep from making a complete mess, we'll get rid of the CV altogether over here, and then we'll bring a little bit of CV into the filter instead. Just grab a slow sine wave. There's a pretty good sweep. As we adjust the harmonics and saturation controls, these go all the way down. Changes quite a bit. And then the single gain stage changes it some more. Open up the filter a little more. Turn up the resonance. Back to 2 stages. Playing around with the harmonics. Saturation. I'm going to move the input to sub-octaves. So we have -1 octave, -2 octave squares, and then a -2 octave pulse. It's this guy here. It's the same sub-oscillator principle as the SH101, so it's a very narrow pulse, 2 octaves down. Makes for some great bass sounds. You can really hear the harmonics. I'll dial that in real quick there. Bring the resonance back down. Lots of low end, still makes it through the tube distortion. Still plenty of bass to work with. The 2044 filter really gives you some nice low end, especially if you bump the resonance just a little bit. So, but it's nice to have extra harmonics to process. So the other way you could patch this is to run the oscillator into the filter first. So I'll just pull these cables out a second, and we'll set it up that way. So we've got our -2 out, and this is just going straight into the camera, so now it's just the filter. You can hear that. There's no resonance. So that's just the filter by itself with the pulse wave. So I'm going to move this, grab the output of the 2044 filter, and go in here. So now we have the low pass filter before the tube distortion. This setup is especially helpful if you're using a lot of resonance, a lot of squelchy sounds, and you just kind of want to take the edge off them a little bit and get some harmonics. So I'll show you that. So I'm turning the resonance up. Get some really neat harmonics doing this. So it's a resonance about 60%, and the frequency's at about half. So I'll start playing with the harmonics up here. Very noticeable. And then go back down here to the frequency control. And that's just a really subtle move of the knob. So it really catches on the harmonic peaks of the signal when the tube distortion is after the low pass filter. You can hear all those peaks. So I kind of want to hear that with a saw. I'm going to send the saw into the CV input of this filter. We should hear it kind of catching all the different harmonics. So you can hear the filter start high and then sweep down, make it a little more dramatic, a little more CV. Slow this down just a little bit. Lots of signal to work with, lots of harmonics there. I'm going to bring the pitch down now. This would be a good time to go back to adjusting the tube distortion. I'm just going to adjust the harmonics again. It's all the way the other direction. A little bit of a different character in the middle. Up. It's a little edgier, a little brighter. Adjust the saturation control. So now it's almost doing like this stuttering type thing. That's the harmonics all the way down. So we'll go from 2 gain stages to 1. Kind of do the same thing. Turn the harmonics up. And saturation. So a little more subtle with the single gain stage. Let's bring in a little less resonance, see what happens. That is a big bass sound. This through a stereo delay would be just amazing. Pitch back up. up a little bit. So that's the LFO that's affecting the filter. Put the resonance back up. So now it's just a big gnarly mess. So we're mostly hearing filter oscillation, just hitting up that distortion. Might be a fun way to make some drum sounds. Grab another waveform, so we'll go over to the pulse. So that's just the resonance of the filter by itself. A little bit of noise and stuff get processed. Just with the really high gain settings. Play around with the pulse width. So let's get the CV out of here. Bring some CV back in. Grab the sine wave again. So there's resonance, about half. Bring in a little bit of that CV again. Do a sine, a little smoother. Gives it a little bit of animation. CV's just turned up a little bit. So here you can really see the harmonics control is doing something. As we keep turning it up. Higher pitch sound kind of goes away and turns into something totally different. So there's like kind of the edge of it, like right there. It's kind of a neat tonality. So it's kind of the resonance like right on the edge. Turn the filter frequency down. And that's 2 gain stages now instead of 1. So now I'm playing with the pulse width and the oscillator. So now we're closer to the square wave. Now we're pretty much turning off right there. So modulating that might be kind of interesting. Use this oscillator here. Another sine wave. Pulse width modulation. So that's just CV going to the pulse width. Turn it down here and here. Bring in the filter And then tube distortion. Do very different things. Yeah, so that's another way to patch this. Maybe in the next video we'll show some kind of a bass line going through this. Something a little more musical, a little more normal. Lots of sound design potential here for really big, spacious sounds, especially when you add a delay. And we'll actually add some delay sounds. So thanks for watching. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. And all these modules are in stock right now and available on our website, stoelmusicsystems.com. Thanks for watching.